I'm gonna do it. Now I'm gonna share the screen. So welcome everyone. Today we're gonna learn about the theology of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And today only I'm gonna give you an introduction. But there will be another 3 layers, another 3 webinars about the way of studying in the first century and the way they think about theology and the way they interpreted the scrolls. Today, scholars, we are discovering that their way of thinking in the first century of studying is not like today. There's something called the Targum. Targum is a Hebrew and Aramaic word, which is a translation. So they do a translation from the Hebrew to the Aramaic. And then another layer is the Midrash with interpretations and deeper interpretations and more flexibility. And another lecture will be about the Pesher, with the Pesher means eschatology. So we're going to take Dead Sea Scrolls. We're going to take quotations from the Dead Sea Scrolls and go deeper into all of that interpretations. But today, again, is only an introduction. So why the Dead Sea Scrolls are one of the most significant archaeological discoveries of the 20th century. Why? I will answer this during this lecture. Because together we will explore the context of the Essenes, the life of the community there, and their identity and their beliefs, and why they are so much important. And just to let you know, today, Qumran remains a gateway into Second Temple Judaism and to the world of the Dead Sea Scrolls. These people were a phenomena. And in order to understand Second Temple Judaism, we have to learn about the Dead Sea Scrolls. The agenda for today, we will begin with a geographical orientation, and then we will speak about the discovery that took place what year, and then we'll cover more about excavations, what they found, and that revealed for us the life of that community. And we're going to learn about the historical perspective and the identity of the Essenes and the types of the scrolls we're going to learn about, and the languages that the scrolls were written in: Aramaic, Greek, and Hebrew, and we will learn about it. And I'm going to explain about what is the Targum, Midrash, and the Pesher, and give you a lot of examples. But this is the agenda for today. And by the way, Yahad is the name of the community, the Essenes in Hebrew, Yahad, that lived in Qumran, and they lived in this part of the world, Israel. And here you can see the Mediterranean Sea to the left. You can see here all the Holy Land, and you can see the Dead Sea. To the right is the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. And you can see the Jordan River all the way from the Dead Sea, all the way line up. And it happened that Qumran is situated in a unique geographical area. And it's not far from the Dead Sea, as you see here. And there is a reason why they choose that part. Because the proximity of Qumran to the Dead Sea is important for the historians. And why did they come to this part far away from the corruption of Jerusalem? Here is Jerusalem, you see here. And they ran away from the corruption, and they founded a place that no one can reach, far away in the desert. And we're going to learn about their culture and social practices and why did they choose that part of the world. Now, we have a lot of caves discovered. It have a rich history. And today, scholars are aware of around 220 caves in that area, but 11 of them are important. Why 11 of them are important? Because in 1947, when they found first the discovery, until today, excavations, these are the major caves. Cave number 1 is where they first found the scrolls. Cave number 2 is the second year they found the scrolls. Cave number 3 is the third time they found the scrolls. So 11 caves is the latest cave, number 11, where they found the scrolls. So it's named from 1 to 11 according to the number of the years they found it, chronological, from 1 to 11. Of course, there's more caves are found, more scrolls today and parchments. Altogether, around 900 manuscripts are found in several caves. And some of them are scroll fragments, thousands of scroll fragments. And it gives us a crucial information about that part, Second Temple Judaism. Of course, there's artifacts also, jars, tools, uncovered. We have pottery, we have inkwells, and a lot of storage rooms. That all affirms that that was not a religious community only. They were a very strict scribal community. So they were scribes. They were people that are interested in preserving the text. Here are some archaeological remains. And not only the importance is only the manuscripts, which are very important, but we find, for example, stone vessels, all right? And the stone vessels tell us that they were specific practice. They were according to the halakha. And according to the halakha, which is the rabbinical law, in the Mishnah, it's written, stone vessels do not become ritually impure. The way they use these stone vessels and not pottery or other kind of jars is to keep them clean, which is in Hebrew called tmu'ah. Tmu'ah is to stay clean, or tahor. Tahor means clean. So stone vessels are for high priest. And we know that only Jews will use them. And if when we do archaeology in Jerusalem, if we see stone vessels, we know there were high priests in that. For example, the Jewish quarter, when they're done excavations, we found a lot of stone vessels. We know that these were high priests. So this is a Jewish identity, and purity is part of the Second Temple Judaism. And just to remind you, Jesus used these stone vessels in John chapter 2, verse 6. The gospel says, now there were 6 stone water jars. Therefore, the Jewish rites of purification. Remember when he was in Cana? So when he says stone jars, this means there is religious community, there is Jewish community in that location. And that's what's the first miracle Jesus had done. So this is in context of the ritual purity vessels. Of course, there was other things found like glasses and plates, hundreds of plates in excavations in the 50s. Also, there were inkwells. And, you know, inkwells is that it's like little jars, you see them here, with ink, where people would dip their pen and writing the manuscript. And it's like copying the manuscript and store the manuscript. And they store it in a place called scriptorium. And today in archaeology, when you go to Qumran, I led so many hundreds of groups, we go to the scriptorium, to the room, and where they found these ink wells. And that is another evidence of their distinct lifestyle. They were dedicated and serious scholars. You know, that was their daily life, and how to preserve scripture and how to keep spiritual life and to be engaged with a community, living in isolation. And the way this is Muhammad al-Deeb. I won't tell you all the story, how he discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls, but in general, he was born in 1931, and this is during the 1950s, probably, or 60s. He was in his young age. And 1947, when he discovered the scrolls, it was a pivotal moment in history. He went to a cave, and this cave is called cave number 1. Let me show you the picture. I'm pointing here where is the cave. And by the way, to the left side is the site, but this is not open yet for public, but now they're doing trails. I don't know if you've seen this image, and they're gonna, soon in the future, you're gonna visit these caves. And this is the cave number one. Why it's called number one? Because they found first the Bedouin. He was searching for his goat and he thought it was inside. He threw a stone and he did not find the goat inside. He heard pottery crashing. How he can hear the pottery? Because it's quiet in the desert. You can hear everything. It was coming dark. He went to Bethlehem, to the Amri village, and next day with his cousin, he came back. Of course, on his way back, he found the goat. And the next day they came and they found these parchments, okay? They were very happy. They thought this is skin of animals. They're gonna make good money by selling it to a shoemaker. And the shoemaker happened to be an Aramaic Christian. He saw Aramaic words coming. So he bought it only for $100. He gave it to them. They were so happy, $100 each. It was 200 for him and his cousin. It's almost like 5,000 bucks today. But it was one of the most important discoveries. And the shoemaker, Aramaic Christian, he went to his bishop in Jerusalem, and his bishop was the smartest one. He booked his ticket to the United States, and it proved in the United States that all of these scrolls are legitimate and became famous. And then the state of Israel was founded in 14th of May, 1948. And they bought back from the States these Dead Sea Scrolls. So it's a big story, why it's famous, and today we're gonna discover why it's important. But let us know more about what archaeology found there and how it proves that these are special people that live there. How come we know? From something that indicates like people lived in a community and they are religious, is this ritual bath, okay? And we call it in Hebrew, mikveh, mikveh. And in plural, mikvaot, which means ritual bath. And the significance of the mikvaot is only for spiritual practices, symbolizing purity and cleansing by ritual immersion. They go to the right side here, all the way the steps, they dip completely, they open their hands, their mouth, their eyes, dip under the water completely and go up cleansed to the left side. This is the idea of later of baptism, and they used it a lot, the community, and before writing scripture, before eating food. So these are very, very serious scholars. They were so much in spiritual purity. And this is Jewish ancient culture. And this is what baptism came later on. The idea of baptism in Christianity is taken from Qumran, the Dead Sea Scrolls. We're going to learn during these lectures. This is only an introduction, by the way, but during these lectures, we can see how much Christianity adopted so much from baptism. And then we're going to read verses from scripture later. So we have a lot of historical resources about Qumran from the Second Temple period, from the 1st century. We have Philo, who lived in the 1st century AD. We have Josephus Flavius, a famous historian. We have Pliny the Elder. And these are all writers that tell us about the group by the name Essenes, who lived alone apart from the Jews, far away from Jerusalem, nearby the Dead Sea. So why it's very important? Because Philo of Alexandria is an early church father, all right? And he is a very important writer. And he was aware about the Essenes. He was aware about the Qumran community. He have valuable descriptions that help us understand their way of life and the challenges they faced during their time. And you know that Philo of Alexandria is a Hellenistic Jew. He's actually a philosopher from Egypt. And we will refer a lot of him as historians about his writings. And then we have another important person, Josephus Flavius, and he was born around 37 AD. Yosef ben Matatyahu, his name in Hebrew, Yosef ben Matatyahu. And we know Like for scholars, Josephus Flavius is a Bible for them. You know, when Christians, we wake up, we want to read the Bible in the morning, we open scripture and read the Bible. Archaeologists, when they wake up in the morning, they read Josephus Flavius. So it's a very important. And Josephus Flavius is the most historian that speaks about the Essenes. And I'm going to show you some examples. What do he say about this community? And also, Pliny the Elder is another like crucial historical figure, and he wrote Natural History, a famous book for the Romans, and he mentioned about the geographical locations of the Essenes. And he was born around 23-24 AD, all the way to 79 AD. You see that even early historians knew about their existence from the 1st century. Now, a little bit about Philo of Alexandria, what in his writings, what he says about the Essenes. At least he mentioned it in 3 works. Now, he wrote a lot of books, and the 3 major ones that he mentioned the Essenes is Every Good Man is Free, that he wrote it. Another is he wrote a letter to Eusebius, an early church father, which he called it the Hypothetica, and he mentions about the Essenes, and he wrote Apology for the Jews. We have only fragments of it. And Philo offers a very important portrait picture. And he's telling them that they were wise men, you know, as you see in the list here. He's telling them that they were peaceful, they were devout mystics who lived together as a community. But he does not mention the location, or he doesn't say these are the Dead Sea Scrolls, or he doesn't mention the name Qumran by name. But his descriptions is known for a sect that is together. So most of the scholars say this is the Essenes. And look what he says about the daily routine. They rise at dawn, pray, engage in labor, study scripture, eat together. Look what Philo said about their like peace and purity. They were peaceful, law-abiding, and exceptionally disciplined. Purity. They avoid oath, anger, and impurity. Great attention to ritual cleanness. All right. Communal life. They reject private property and hold everything in common. So these are people living in the desert. And let us see what Josephus Flavius, which is the most he mentions about the Essenes. Of course, he wrote a lot of books, a lot of volumes of books, but 3 of his books mentions the detailed life of these people. He mentioned first in the Jewish Wars, book number 2, from verses 119 to 161, about the Essenes. And his other book, Antiquities of the Jews, in book 18, verses 18 to 22, he mentions about the Essenes, and also he wrote about his life, the autobiography of his life, and mentions the Essenes. But let me read for you about what he said. Look what Josephus Flavius said. There are over 4,000 Essenes living throughout Judea in cities and villages. Not only about the Qumran, but they are all over. Okay? And they share everything in common, no personal property. They have morning prayers, their daily routines, communal meals, work in fields. Of course, about purity, about scripture. This is important. Scripture, they study sacred writings, deep reverence for the law, for the Torah, and celibacy. They are not married. They don't marry. They don't believe in marriage. Because they say marriage, according to Josephus Flavius, leads to distraction and temptation. And of course, they preserve Sabbath. They're extremely strict about Sabbath. And they never defecate on the Sabbath. Anyway, too much information about Josephus Flavius. But we have here from Josephus Wars, chapter 2, 1, 22 to 23. Look what he said. They are despisers of riches, and so commendable is their simplicity, that one among them will be seen with gold or silver, nor do they acquire land or houses or slaves. Like none among them. So they don't believe in any richness. And look in the Jewish wars. In chapter 2, verse 137, they do not swear at all. Their saying is stronger than an oath. They avoid speaking falsely and regard lying as worse than perjury. So Josephus may have idealized or like the Essenes for a Roman audience. He was writing for the Romans. But his description aligns closely with their practices, all right? And how we know that? We have the community rules that is discovered in Cave 1. And we have something called the Damascus document discovered in Cave 4, mentioning the rules. And what Josephus Flavius is saying is very much related to what we found in the documents. But here is Pliny the Elder, and Pliny the Elder gave a short explanation, but he was writing for the Romans again, and he was a Roman historian. He wrote natural history. And he just mentions briefly about the geographical references to the Essenes. And strongly, he said it was something near called Qumran. And this is aligned with archaeological discoveries. And of course, Pliny refers to them as the Essenes because he took the Greek name of them. And the Greek name is from the original language, is not Essenes. In Greek is Esoio. Esoio. But the original name is a Hebraic Aramaic name, actually. It's a Semitic name. The Semitic name is Asio. Asio in Aramaic is a healer. So Asio from Aramaic changed to Isaio in Greek and to Essenes in English. So their names is only the Greek name Essenes to English today, but the original name is Asio, which means a healer in Aramaic. Because of writing, you translate the names. So that's the translation that took place. Anyway, you have to know that Pliny the Elder is writing through a Hellenistic approach, all right, a Roman approach. It's like a Stoic admiration for their austere life. Shows his writing, the cultural lens that Philo is trying to show us, and Pliny the Elder. Anyway. So let us go one level more about the identity of the Essenes. It's very deep, by the way, because they are originally connected and they have lineage to the Zadok high priest families in the temple in the Jerusalem. They consider themselves as guardians of sacred tradition. The Essenes, they were a very special, separate Jewish sect. And they rejected the Hasmoneans' priesthood. Remember the Hasmonean dynasty, the Maccabees in English? The Maccabees were kings. In the same time, because they were becoming powerful, they became high priests. So they took the priesthood, they bought the priesthood, and they got the priesthood. And whenever you become a high priest and at the same time a ruler, you become so corrupt. So there was a lot of corruption, and the Zadok, high priest, the Essenes, said, we are not going to follow the Hasmoneans. They are so much corrupt in the temple. You can't become a king and a high priest at the same time and rule. So they separated themselves and they said, we do not believe in that lineage of the Hasmoneans. And we have to go isolate ourselves in the desert to maintain our own temple, to maintain our own purity, and to have strict Torah observation. And they wanted to become holy sanctuary for God. And they have apocalyptic expectations. So their identity is a Zadok high priest, viewed themselves as the true guardians of the covenant of Israel and the authors and the preservers of the law of Moses. Of course, as I said, they rejected the corrupt priesthood They criticized the priestly class because of their corruption and the amount of taxes, and they told them to go back to genuine spirituality because their desire for authentic faith and their writings expresses a longing for a pure and more authentic practice of faith. They refused any handouts or any corruption that happened in front of their eyes. They could not stay in Jerusalem, so they went to the desert. So let us learn a little bit about their beliefs. And in later lectures, I'm gonna discuss with you about their apocalyptic way of thinking. I'm gonna take scriptures, we're gonna take the scrolls and go in details. But again, I'm giving you a general picture today. Because as religious, faithful Jews, they have apocalyptic beliefs. And they say, we have divine relationship and we have divine establishment with the God of Israel. And the Essenes were so much into the end of days. And because they believe they are holy sanctuary for God, they established this divine intervention, reflecting their hope for a transformed world in the current days that they are living. So most of the writings were apocalyptic expectations, and they believed in the divine plan of the moment, of the day. We're going to talk more about it, but they saw themselves as the guardians of the covenant, guardians of the tradition. And how they can do that? By preserving their ethical and spiritual values through separate, isolated practices far away from any other communities. Because the Essenes, they studied and scripture with intense discipline and mystic expectations because they believed in divine judgment. And this is why many scholars, we call them the custodians of the Dead Sea Scrolls, the oldest biblical manuscript ever discovered. Now, I'm gonna tell you there are 3 types of scrolls discovered in Qumran by the Essenes. There are something called biblical or canonical texts that is found. And then we have another type, apocrypha, and also pseudepigraphal texts. I explain everything later. And we have unique scripture about their sectarians, about their sects. So there are 3 categories of scrolls found. We're going to go one by one. The first type is the biblical text, the canon, the Torah, the prophets, the writings. You know what's Torah in Hebrew, the law, the instructions, and which contains something called the Nevi'im, which is the prophets. By the way, the Torah is the 5 books of Moses also, okay? I can name you the scrolls. Bereshit means Genesis, Shemot means Exodus, Vayikra means Leviticus, Bemidbar means Numbers, and Dvarim means Deuteronomy. And actually, we're going to take verses from these discoveries and talk about them in the Targum and the Midrash and the Pesher. Then Nevi'im, we have the prophets. Of course, we have the former prophets and the later prophets, like Joshua, Yehoshua, Judges, Shoftim, 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel, 1 King and 2 Kings. And then we have the later prophets like Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and the 12 minor prophets. Then we have the Tovim, which are the writings. And like the Psalms, the Tehillim, Proverbs, Mashali, Job. By the way, Job is mentioned so much in the books, so we're going to talk about it also. And all the other Song of Songs, Ruth, Lamentations, Ecclesiastic. By the way, they found all the books except Esther. We don't have Esther. So this is how the canon, this is how the Hebrew canon there, which we found all of it in Qumran except the book of Esther. And we don't know, maybe it was eroded, maybe it was not found or was not written. They were very strict. They don't want any woman there, but probably that's the reason, one of the reasons. So let me think about the second type of books, are apocrypha books. And apocrypha come from the Greek word, which means concealed or hidden. It's a set of Jewish writings from the Second Temple period that were included in the Septuagint. You know what the Septuagint is? The Greek translation of the Bible that took place in 3 BC, which we found parchments of the Septuagint in the Qumran. And this is very important to understand about the Septuagint. I made a complete picture, what is the Septuagint. And I'm going to show you its importance here when we study the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, also in Christian tradition, especially among Catholic and Orthodox, there are books that are considered to be deuterocanonical, which means second canon, all right? Like the book of Tobit, the book of Judith, the Wisdom of Solomon, Sirach, the book of Baruch, the first and the second Maccabees, additional portion of the book of Daniel, and additional portion of the book of Esther, which we found also some fragments of these books, like the pseudo-graphical books, like we have the book of Enoch, found in the Qumran, on the Dead Sea Scrolls. And it speaks about the watchers, speaks about dreams. This is the interpretation of Genesis chapter 6, which we will read later and tell you how they thought about the book of Enoch and what did they think about it. Even we find it in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And the last, like as I mentioned, pseudo-graphic works is pseudo in Greek means false, all right, in a way. False, it's not false is wrong, is false attribution, which means we don't know the writers. That's what is it. So it refers to texts attributed to ancient biblical figures, but written later by others with other names. And that was found also in the Dead Sea Scrolls, in Qumran, and often written in Aramaic and also in Hebrew. And it reveals so much about the 3rd century BC time of history till 1st century AD. So again, these are books that are not included in the Hebrew Bible, but they preserve traditions, mythologies, angelology, a lot about angels, and a lot about eschatology, which we're going to learn. And are from like different, also translated later for different languages. Anyway, a key example is the book of Jubilee. This is a book that is like a lot of details about apocryphy and authoritative powers and circles. And it's retelling the Genesis and Exodus, all right? Then we have the Testament of Levi, patriarchs in Aramaic and in Hebrew. Levi, of course, are the high priests and their visions and their celestial priesthood and divine wisdom and influence later on Christian writings also. And then we have also another book called the Genesis Apocryphon. Also, it was written in Aramaic about dreams, angels, visitations, and divine revelations. Anyway, it's all eschatological worldview of the Essenes at that time. We're going to learn about this cosmic identity, that they are, for example, the sons of the light and the remnant of the priesthood. They're waiting for Melchizedek, the figure. But anyway, we're going to read all about the scrolls from, this is only an introduction. Third type, which is very important, is about the sectarian texts. It's about Qumran and the rules and more about what do they believe. And they themselves believed in community. There are so many rules that it's not easy to be part of that community. You have to have training minimum 2 years in order to be in that community. In these sectarian texts, we learn about their beliefs and about their regulations. There's a scroll called the War Scroll. There's another scroll called the Temple Scroll, made of copper. There's other writings like the Thanksgiving hymns we have that reveals about their purity and their eschatological expectations. So anyway, to make it short, 3 kinds of books found in Qumran: biblical, pseudo-chronicle, and then we have the sectarian text outside the Bible. And why it's very important, why I'm mentioning all of that. We have to understand why this discovery is so much important because of the languages of the translations. Now, today, we have so many translations today of the Bible that we have in our hands. And these are the translations that we have been using throughout the years. And it was taken from the Septuagint, all right? The Greek translation. And today we have the NIV, the King James, the CSV. We have all of these modern ones, but in recent history, all these modern ones, these translations were based on one Masoretic manuscript. Dates back to 1000 AD. Remember, I gave a lecture about the Masoretic text and the Lingred Codex. The Lingred Codex is the complete Jewish Torah that we have from 1000 AD. And what does this mean? All the translations today was made originally either from the Septuagint or from the Codex, like the NIV and ASV and all of that. But now we can go all the way to the Dead Sea Scrolls. We can go to the 3rd century BC. We can go to 300 BC and compare what was found in the Septuagint. Is it the same? We can compare the Bible of the Lingred Codex. Was it the same? And surprisingly enough, that scholars are seeing that there are so manuscripts are the same. So let me explain again. Prior to this discovery, imagine the Dead Sea Scrolls were not found. We had only the Lingred Codex, dating from 1000 AD, as I said. It was the oldest complete manuscript of the Holy Bible. Now, when the discoveries was made in Qumran, we found older ones from 300 BC. So that means now we have manuscripts that are over 1000 years older of what we already have in our hands. So scholars now could check whether anything had been changed between 300 BC until today. And they can see if the Septuagint was changed, or even if the Lingred Codex was changed, the Masoretic text. And they can compare these two. And surprisingly enough, there was not differences. There was perfect consistency from 300 BC to the Masoretic time, all the way that proved and boosted the confidence in the texts that we have today. So this is why it's important. And I see as a picture here, you see in the picture, this is what we found in the scrolls, and this is the codex in the middle, and this is today. So now we can go all the way back to confirm that it's similar to the Septuagint and similar to the codex. Anyway, what languages they were written? You have to understand that the main language at that time in the 1st century and 3 BC till 1 AD, Hebrew was declining. And there was a Greek language dominant, because we know that from the Septuagint translation. And we know that most Jews were speaking Aramaic. And this is what we call the Targum. There was a multilingual environment in that community. So there were Jews, but mostly they spoke Aramaic. And the diversity of the languages indicates their culture and linguistic complicity of the community at Qumran. Because these are like important manuscripts that we found from different languages, and from the languages we understand the Second Temple Judaism. Later, I'm going to speak and show you Aramaic scripture, and we can know the interpretations, what is called the Targum, which is Aramaic of the Hebrew scrolls. So we can understand what they think about end days. So we're going to go into details and take it. For example, Targum. What is Targum? Targum is a Hebrew word for translation, an Aramaic word, Targama, and Tarjama in Arabic. And by the way, Targum, Tarjama, is not only interpretation, also explanation. And we have a word from Aramaic we call the tour guides today, Turjman, which comes from the Aramaic, which means explanation. He gives interpretation, which means a tour guide in Arabic today. Turjman, tour guide. Tour guide explains. So that's the origin of the word, a guide. So the Targum, the Aramaic, is like a guide. So there's a very depth into the linguistics. And this is what we're gonna see in the next 3 lectures. In the next 3 lectures, we're gonna learn about what is a Targum and what is a Midrash, is a deeper way of studying, and what is a Pesher. Pesher, it relates to eschatology. Today, I just gave you a general picture of the next 3 lectures. And these 3 lectures will be also on a course. It's an online course. It's a paid online course. And you can go to twinstours.com, twinsbiblicalacademy.com, and go to the paid courses. And in the paid courses, the month of May, I'm going to have 3 lectures about in-depth about what we found with the Dead Sea Scrolls. Any questions, any comments, you're welcome. Thank you all so much.